Dr. Theo Acheampong, you have been reminding us a bit of what happens if the fundamentals are weak. You spend the whole week tormenting us over that. So from where you sit and from the interactions that you have with business people, what is going on? And I mentioned on my handle that I spoke with two very influential business leaders in the course of this week, and it got me really thinking, because I didn't sit up to think about the situation from the perspective that they gave until I listened to them, and I discovered that we are in very, very serious crisis.
Yeah, good morning, Samson. The reality is things are very, very tough for a lot of Ghanaians at the level of the household, so individuals like you and I, but also at the level of businesses. In fact, I left Ghana just a week ago. I was on the ground for 2 weeks on a separate research project. And anytime I'm there, I take the time to speak to ordinary Ghanaians on the streets. And my trip took me around bits of Accra. So I was around your Osu, Laboni areas. I went to Amasaman.
Yes, I followed you sharing some of those interactions.
Exactly. The point really is I spoke to not less than maybe about 100 people. So it's not exactly scientific, but the concerns that they expressed is very much what you're hearing from the people that we spoke to or who called into the program a few minutes ago, that they are struggling. They are having to spend more money on the same goods that they used to buy. And they also are having to make extra adjustments, right, in that regard. Prof. Bokmin was talking about the fact that in Ghana we have family social responsibility, especially if you are the middle class, where you may have 6, 7 people who are dependent, right, on you. And so you have to use that same meager resource to more or less support them. And even I am feeling it. So I filled my tank when I was in Ghana.
I kid you not, it can be very draining.
Yes, so I filled my tank. Before, last year or early this year when I was around, I was filling it for about 350 Ghana cedis, right? Sometimes 370. That's a small Corolla. This time around, I was spending about 500 cedis to fill that tank. And that is the reality. And when I was there, you also had a lot of people, even here in the UK, you have people from Ghana who would reach out to you to sort of support them one way or the other. So it is tough all around in Ghana. And I worry, particularly because it's not just the middle class feeling the pinch. You have a lot more of our people also at the lower tiers of the society. So at the traffic light, I was talking to one lady who sells, PK, and another one that sells hacks, right, as we call it, and pure water. And they were telling you that what they used to actually make before is not the same as they're making now. And one thing that was also very obvious to me 2 weeks ago in Accra was that there was less traffic on the roads in the morning, right? So what that was telling me implicitly is that some people are making adjustment by deciding not to drive their cars. Maybe people are carpooling, but the difficult economic circumstances is forcing them to make certain, cuts to their living and lifestyle choices. And that is quite worrying and concerning in that regard. The challenge is that unlike here in the UK, maybe where you have some social safety nets and safeguards which you can resort to, you don't necessarily have that in Ghana. So to an extent, you are out there on your own in that regard.
Maybe we start on this note from your end. What are the implications of the downgrades by S&P CCC/C+, is it? What kind of exam do you do and get CCC plus another C? And then Fitch came. Of course, the Ministry of Finance has not been excited about these downgrades. For a while now, it also issues statements to seek to counter. But I sit back and ask myself, what are we trying to do? Are we trying to fight the reality? But what are the implications of this for us, particularly at this time?
Yeah, so before I come to the implications, remember that the first downgrades that we saw earlier this year, especially the Moody's one, the Ministry of Finance actually issued a very strongly worded statement, more or less criticizing that downgrade and disagreeing with it. If you look at the last two downgrades from S&P and Fitch, and you read the similar statements that have been issued, they use a much softer word, that they are disappointed, quote and unquote, in that regard. So you can actually see a bit of a shift in terms of the tone, and also the fact that this recent downgrade or of the sovereign rating or the sovereign debt of the country pretty much in a way reflects some of the reality. And the reality being that, particularly, for example, for Fitch, they decided not to downgrade Ghana at the beginning of the year. They said that they were actually going to wait to see if the new revenue measures like the e-levy and things like that will kick in. And as we all know, it has really not performed as much as we expected. Secondly, the media budget that was read by the finance minister only a few weeks ago, many of the market participants that I have interacted with pretty much are saying that the budget is not credible. And I'll explain that in a moment. To the extent that the numbers within the budget, like the deficit numbers that the government expects to attain at the end of this year of about 6.6%, they already have done more than 5.6% of it by this year. And so what that tells you is that 1% gap that is left, you have to make significant cuts to your public expenditure if you want to be able to meet those targets. So all those issues pretty much have led to what we've seen with the downgrade. And again, remember that this recent downgrade by Fitch and Moody's is the lowest we have had as a country for the last 20 or so years since they started rating us. Historically, we have been between the B category, and they are like B plus to B minus. So it ranks on a scale of A to D, A being the best, D being a default, and anything in between. And if you go back over 20 years, we have been in that sort of B category, and now we've actually shifted one level below to a C, which is almost close to or near to a default category. So that is, in a sense, where we are. The question then you ask is, what does that mean for you and I? I mean, the bottom line is the fact that the downgrade ultimately makes the cost of borrowing by the government very difficult. So in the past, the government would have had to sell Eurobonds or raise international money from the international capital markets. Now they are unable to do that. So what that then means is that to be able to finance the budget, they have to raise more money from the domestic sources. So more treasury bills, and even you can even think about even some printing of money in that regard. What this does is to prevent us from accessing that international capital market. And so the government, in an attempt to finance its budget, ultimately would mean having to borrow more domestically. And what that then does for people like Humphrey, like the Guta boss, like you and I, is the fact that the cost of borrowing is going to go up because you're competing more or less with the state for the same resource pool. And that comes back to the fundamental question, which is that who is this, who does the economy of Ghana work for? Is it for the people, or it's more or less for the government in terms of borrowing money to service the debt? Because as we speak right now, any further attempt by the central bank to even hike up their policy rate is going to further choke or constrain liquidity in an already very stressful situation that we find ourselves in. And so for you, for me, for the businesses, the cost of borrowing ultimately is going to go up, and that would then have a subsequent effect in the real economy.
Right.